The time is just gone 8:23 a.m. and we kick off this morning looking at the life and the legacy of former President of South Africa, F.W. de Klerk, and we're joined on the line by David van Wyk, who is a researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation. David, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Good morning and peace and friendship to your listeners.
Yes, wonderful that you are able to join us at a time like this. Now, obviously, when we reflect on the life and the legacy of the former state president of South Africa, F.W. de Klerk, he will be remembered as the last state president in the apartheid era, the release of Nelson Mandela as well, and paving the way for democracy. How would you put his life and legacy into perspective, David?
Well, I think that it's important that we fill in the gaps in the history and remember that FW was a member of the State Security Council. He was present when the Cradock 4, the decision was made to kill the Cradock 4, and he was also present in that same Security Council when Operation Plexi took place in Gaborone, in which 16 people were killed. I was in exile at the time, and I received some of the children of the orphans from that particular massacre in Gaborone at Girls High School, where we accommodated some of these children, after that. And we will also remember that during this time, we also had the Battle of Cuito Cuanavalle, for example, in which 15,000 Angolans were killed. And, we note that he was on the State Security Council from 1985 to 1989, and after 1989, he actually became the head of the State Security Council as the state president. And in that period from 1989 to 1994, 16,000 South Africans died in various massacres, such as the Boipatong massacre, for example, as well. You know, the fact of the matter is that de Klerk and the National Party after 1989 did not have much choice but to release Mandela and to open up the way for democracy because of the international pressure on them and because of the fact that they were losing the war in Angola and also the struggle in Namibia. And so they were really forced to the negotiating table by international pressure and international sanctions and so on as well. You know, we can compare this to the apartheid state of Israel, and we can say that it is this kind of pressure that led to the changes that created democracy in South Africa. It wasn't de Klerk the person, it was the struggle that actually forced the changes in the country. He was merely the head of state at the time when the struggle intensified to the point where they could no longer avoid talk liberation movements towards a change in South Africa.
Yes, and I think the one critical issue that one needs to understand is even during our democracy, the unwillingness on the part of F.W. de Klerk to take full responsibility for the horrors of the apartheid system, which he had presided over.
Well, exactly. I think that he continued to say that apartheid was not a crime against humanity, and he was steadfast on that particular point. And, you know, some very, very intelligent young people were killed during his time. You know, David Webster was my anthropology lecturer at Wits, and while I was in exile, he was killed back in South Africa. We had Albie Sachs maimed in a car bomb in Maputo. We had Anton Lubowski in Namibia assassinated as well at the same time. And, you know, there was the killing of Samora Machel, a head of state of a neighboring state that occurred as well. You know, so I think that for him to say that in his last videoed address to the nation before he died, he claims that he realized in 1980 already that apartheid was wrong. But between 1985 and 1989, as a member of the State Security Council and then as the head of the State Security Council, some 40,000 people died on his watch. And where he personally participated in a group of people who decided who should live and who should die. And that is quite shocking. I mean, the regime became very vicious towards its end. Even as it was negotiating, people were still being killed. There was the Matata massacre where some young teenagers were shot while they were sleeping in Mthatha during that particular period. If we remember Mzwandile Mfeya, he was only 12 years old. Sandiso Yose, he was 12 years old. And the twin Samora and Sadat Mpendeku, 16 years old, and Tandu Ntembu, they were killed in a raid in October 1993. That was months before the elections of 1994. I mean, it was 4 or 5 months before the transition, and these people were all killed in their beds, and the State Security Council made this decision to have them killed, and he was a member of that State Security Council. He was, in fact, chairing it.
Yes, and also the excuse sometimes is to try and understand F.W. de Klerk and the era that he had lived through, and the whole idea surrounding Afrikaner nationalism, that was born as a result of the Boer Wars, and Afrikaners had been subjected to brutal abuse at the hands of the British. Now, I mean, can one hide behind that excuse? David?
Well, I think we need to draw the parallels with Israel again, because in Israel they're hiding behind the excuse of the Holocaust, which really happened. We all agree that it did happen, but they're taking their revenge for the Holocaust on the Palestinian people who had nothing to do with the Holocaust, and so instead of Europe having solved the problem of the Jewish question in Europe by fully restoring the citizenship of Jewish people in Europe, European Jewish people, these people were shipped to Palestine. And in Palestine, they are behaving in the same genocidal manner as what Hitler behaved towards them. And the same thing with Afrikaners, unfortunately, having suffered the Anglo-Boer War and so on. Their revenge wasn't really against Britain. Their revenge was against the black population of South Africa. And noting that as Afrikaners, we were really a settler population in this country. If anything, what should have happened after the Anglo-Boer War would have been a reconciliation with black people at that time already, and accommodating them into the political realities and structures of South Africa at that time. Instead of continuing with colonialism and then introducing a harsher form as apartheid after 1948, surely these things were not logical, in my opinion. If we look at the poor white question and the Carnegie investigations in the 1930s into poor whites, Carnegie recommended that Afrikaners be separated from black people, otherwise they would all become colored. And to rescue the Afrikaner culture and so on from becoming South Africanized at the time. Really, I think that this thing of creating the separate identity of a super race or a super community or a super culture that presides over other cultures really was just one that would create suffering and pain for other people.
Well, David, thank you very much for that and for coming on this morning, talking to us here at Salam Media, reflecting on the life and the legacy of former President F.W. de Klerk. All the best to you, sir. Please be safe.
And thank you for having me on this interview. I really appreciate it.
David van Wyk, researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation, with us this morning.